We have seen from the previous video that using your will is not about repressing, ignoring, or fighting your impulses and urges. Since when there's an urge or an unconscious impulse that you are denying or you are pushing down, it will eventually pop back up. We know this is true from the Victorian will, or even just by reflecting on your own experience. If you think about those times where you use this repression on dieting or anything else, eventually you'll just binge eat for the whole day and drop the diet completely. But at the same time, we know we are animals. We know we have an animal nature in us. We know that we need to appease our desires of this animal nature since we have the same animalistic desires. We need food, we need sleep, we need sex, and so on. Many of these desires need to be filled, otherwise we die. Go without sleep for a few days, or without food and water, and most likely you will die, or you'll become severely ill and debilitated. So this animal nature keeps us alive. But at the same time, do you need to eat a Big Mac plus large fries and Coke in order to survive? Or do you need to sleep for 12 hours a day? Do you need to have sex several times per day? Well, not really. So there's a distinction between what our body needs and the superfluous desires that we have grown accustomed to. We start to build on those essential animal impulses that we all have and added plenty of superfluous and extra layers. While in these past few centuries and millennials, we live in a culture of lacking, so we had less than we needed for optimal living, for the first time in history, we now live in a culture of abundance. We have more than we need for optimal living, without needing to be kings or noblemen. Most of us can take a walk downtown and enter an all-you-can-eat buffet, and for $20 or less, you can eat a lot more than your weekly calories that you may need for optimal living. We all have frequent access to a king's banquet if we want. It's perfectly natural that, with time, these desires have become escapes or distractions for other pains that we have feel. In fact, our mind goes quiet when we satisfy a desire, but a new one will arrive very soon. That's the superfluous, the extra layers that we added to the essential impulse of the desire that we all have and need. Neither abundance or lacking is good for optimal living. Either way, for our will purposes, it's important that you are aware that we have impulses inherent for our animal nature that we need to satisfy, but that we added extra layers on them so they become bigger desires and more powerful impulses than they have to be. Basically, we gave them more energy than needed for our optimal survival, increasing their weight and their density. So maybe you need much more willpower to avoid eating that Big Mac than if we only had that original eating impulse that we actually need to survive. Our impulses are heavier, denser, with more layers due to the different experiences that you may have in life and how our body have shaped during our life. For example, our desire for eating sugar can be about emotional eating and can be a way of managing different emotions or feelings, but it can also be because you have a stomach bacteria that craves for some sugar and so connects to your nervous system and sends you that impulse to eat sugar. Or maybe it's because you got into the habit of eating sugary snacks after lunch, so your body got used to it. It will be very hard to differentiate one from the other, but one way or the other, we can consider them as extra weight and bodily impulses, a desire from your lower self that got inflated. We can call this the constructed animal or the heavier animal. But then, we may have a desire from our higher self, from our higher will, a conscious decision that we make. Maybe it's to start a business, maybe it's to exercise, maybe it's to do some personal development program, maybe it's for a better diet or establishing a retirement savings plan, and so forth. Where these higher self-desires come from is a different matter and it's not suitable for this video. Either way, they are something that we know it will be good for us in the long run, but this desire keeps getting derailed from our minute-to-minute lower self-impulses. So naturally, we need to control these lower self-impulses first, otherwise they will control us. For example, you say you will start a better diet, but after a couple of days, your desire for McDonald's got the better of you. Or you will jog first thing in the morning, but after a few days, you just don't want to get up from the comfortable bed. Or you need to work on your business, but you keep procrastinating with Netflix, and so on. None of these impulses are necessary for your survival. You won't die if you won't watch Netflix, or if you get out of bed an hour earlier, or if you don't go to McDonald's and eat whatever junk food that you are desiring. In other words, the inflated impulses of your lower self, the heavy animal in you, as won, and your will, or higher self, as lost. This is not a matter of feeling guilty, blaming, and turning accusations against yourself because you have done it again or because you are constantly failing. We all do this in a bigger or smaller scale. Almost no one will follow exclusively the will and ignore the animal self or even the inflated animal self. We all follow our lower self in something, and it's actually required since we want to live. So the goal is not to punish yourself or to feel bad because you are following the animal in you. You don't gain anything by feeling guilty. The goal is to know this lower self, this animal in you, and to become aware of it, to work with it rather than against it. We cannot work against our animal nature since those impulses and instincts also keep us alive. But at the same time, the superfluous desires, the extra layers, they add weight that prevents the will to manifest. Our lower animal self is supposed to be there, but must be controlled, must be tamed, must be integrated into a higher self. Otherwise, it will control us. So now that we know this, what can we do? When you feel an urge, an impulse from your lower animal self that goes against your will, and what's against what you truly want, then what can you do? Well, you need to become aware of that urge or impulse and face it with full consciousness, understanding that just because you feel an impulse, you don't necessarily need to follow it. We need to start differentiating behavior or action from impulse. Just because you have an impulse to do something, it doesn't mean that you need to follow it and act on it, even if it's slightly uncomfortable, as the feeling of hunger or having a smoke. You don't need to immediately do it. Also, it's not about denying it, repressing it, ignoring it. It's about facing it and becoming aware of all its facets. Let's say that you feel the need to eat more than you need. Maybe you're addicted to sugar and cookies. Why? What's happening in your body? What's your energy telling you? What voice is arising in you that is forcing you to eat? So rather than ignoring this urge or impulse, you need to face it, become aware of it, stop resisting it. Which doesn't mean acting out or the satisfaction of the impulse. That's our animal nature. The animal in us, as with all animals, only live for the satisfaction of their impulses and desires. So we know we are more than this. Yes, we are animals, but we are also humans with a consciousness and the ability to observe and become aware, which gives us freedom. We can observe the impulses and understand where they come from and the extra weight that they have. When we move through the world unconsciously, from our animal nature, we go from desire to desire, impulse to impulse. What happens when you become aware, without resistance, but also without satisfaction of that desire? Well, it's not about saying, I don't want this, and you repress that impulse to the pit of your being. No, instead, you become aware of what is it in you that wants that, and actually know that impulse. Face it head on, and allow it to flow inside of you. You don't hold on to it, or you don't resist it. You feel it without resistance, but also without satisfaction. At least until you choose it. This awareness of the desire and impulse that we may have is both an energetic one and an intellectual one. You need to be able to make this distinction. Knowing the intellectual reason for something, it's not the same thing as facing it or being aware of it. This will be staying in the mental only. Using the same example, you may know that your body is addicted to sugar and may have all the intellectual justifications about the hormones, the brain, and all of that. You may even know about emotional eating and why you got addicted and your past family history and whatever bacteria causing you to have this desire. But it's not the same as becoming fully aware of your feelings and all the energy behind them. It's always about the energy. What's the energy behind that impulse? How does it feel? How does it behave? How does it affect the rest of your body and mind? What's generating it? How can you stop holding on to it and stop resisting it? By becoming aware of it and gently letting it go, instead of fighting it, resisting it, or ignoring it, you are avoiding the backlash of repression, which always manifests itself as an energetic contraction. The less energetic contraction that you have inside due to that impulse, the easier it will be for you and the less suffering that you'll have. By doing this, You are not only getting in touch with the animal nature in you, but you're also getting rid of the weight that is attached to your animal desires. For example, you start to feel the different aspects of hunger. Sometimes you'll know that you're not really hungry, but instead you just want junk food or sugary snacks. It's not hunger or the need to feed your animal. It's something else that was built on top of it. The awareness over yourself and your desires starts to get more and more refined, and you'll understand and control it much better. Of course, to accomplish this, your awareness needs to be developed as well as the will. It's fundamental not to live simply reacting to what you feel, but instead live with intention and awareness so that your will can manifest itself in your behaviors. Otherwise, something else, in this case your lower animal nature, is controlling you. If you decide to work on something, what's pushing you to do something else? Notice that impulse. Become aware of everything around it. You need to experientially know energy. Know your inner voice, your mind, and your body. The more you know it, the more you'll be able to know about what's coming up. This also forces you to be conscious of what's going on inside. If you are simply unconscious of your impulses in your daily living, then the animal in you will keep overpowering all your behaviors and your actions, because you keep blindly following your random internal impulses instead of actively deciding what you want to do. So the first step is putting this animal under control, integrating its urges, and start to consciously deciding your actions. What would you do if you could integrate these animal impulses in you? So if you weren't dominated by them, but instead you could dominate them. Not by repression, not by ignoring, but by actively being aware of them and choosing not to fall on them. In the next video, we'll talk about will development exercises and how you can start doing just that.